and visuals. So this is where I believe when I'm using time, I often will actually write down on my schedule how long we're doing something for. But the visuals themselves of it, the timers are actually visual. But I do recommend if you have a schedule, you always add time as well, because I've got kids who rush through everything or don't want to finish things because they didn't know how long. So they are all the actions I would take around using a timer. But remember, I'm aiming for independence. So what I want is the kid to set their own timer on their phone, to set their own oven timer. Is that a lifelong skill, learning when they're cooking to learn to use a timer? Absolutely. When they go to catch public transport when they're older, or if you've got older kids now and adults, do they need to be able to manage time to catch the train or the bus? Absolutely. And if they miss the bus or the train, do they need a plan B and to be able to look at the timetable and see when the next ones are coming? Absolutely. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, hello everybody. Today's podcast is so important. My aim with every student, child I work with is to aim for independence. And one of my favourite sayings is always begin with the end in mind. So what I mean by that is we need to think what we're aiming for that child. And a little bit of that helps you choose your battles. So for example, if I'm working on toilet training, I don't bother with a potty. We just go straight to the toilet because that's beginning with the end in mind. Some of my kids don't like lead pencils because they break. Well, ultimately, my goal is they're writing and also sharpening pencils, a whole lot of issues. Why not just start with a pen? Begin with the end in mind. Or for some of my kids who really struggle with dysgraphia, let's just use typing. Begin with the end in mind. So when you're listening today, I would love you to just think of one child or student and think about one of your goals and what is the end goal, because so many people get caught up in the little bits along the way, which are important too, but we need to think the bigger picture. So another example that I often have to use in schools is, the kid really struggles to sit on the mat. Well, I don't think sitting with your legs crossed is a life goal. I would prefer the child learnt to sit in a chair. That is really, really important skill for life and work and a job in the future and social engagement with families, sitting at the table. So often what I do is I actually let the child sit in a chair because a chair gives them more feedback. So from an occupational therapist perspective, the child actually knows where their body belongs in space. Whereas on the mat, not only do they have to work out where to cross their legs, put their back straight, but other children touch them and move around, and that can be very confusing. So what I normally do, and many of you have been to my workshops sort of heard me talk about this, I have a chair for the child with autism spectrum and a chair for their friend. And I use that as a friendship chair. So any child I see being supportive, friendly, helping my child with ASD, I say to them, well done, Joseph. You helped Jessica. You can sit in the friendship chair. So then all the kids start telling me how they're helping that child. So it's a really positive, actually, way to get the kids wanting to help a child who learns and engages differently. So anyway, give it a try. I found it works really well. But sitting on the mat with your legs crossed, when's the last time you did that? I don't think that's an end goal. So let's dive in deep today to building independence and success. So for me, I use a very simple formula. Strategy plus action equals success. I highly recommend you download the PDF that goes with today's podcast. It is just a one-pager. What are the actions you can do? Some ideas of strategies and independence and success. So you can dive in deep and go, okay, do I need to model it? Do we need to practice it? Do we need to persist? Do I need to break it down into smaller steps? So we'll come back to that later, but there's a whole lot of actions you can take. In my experience, you need to use a couple of actions to make a difference. But I also call this my 50-50 learning behaviour plans. And those of you who've been to my workshops or have done my online course, I encourage you to look in the handout. There's a one-pager that really explains the 50-50 learning behaviour programs. And if you haven't been to my workshops or done my online course, I highly recommend that you jump on to my website at the moment. There are free webinars running until June 12th, and there is $20 off at the moment. Look, guys, the feedback from the courses is unbelievable. Like every day I get emails where people say to me, how fantastic online learning is. Here's one from Arnie. Your idea to provide online courses is absolutely fantastic for carers and for individual learning styles. No more large audiences, no more problems with seeing and hearing presentations, no more long sessions, no more travel, no more accommodation costs, no more after-school PD sessions where I'm so tired I can't absorb or concentrate. Arnie's in New Zealand, so shout out to all the New Zealanders who listen in. But, I think that's the big advantage. You can watch it anywhere, anytime. I also love this one from Margaret. I did the online courses with you and Tony Atwood. They have been so helpful to me and my clients and my families. Margaret's a counsellor. I work as a counsellor and I often have children referred on the spectrum. Your ideas have helped me to appreciate these children and advocate for them in their schools and within their families. Thank you. I get teary when I read that. I mean, to give a school counsellor who's obviously got years of experience that sort of insight and be able to advocate for these kids is fantastic. And this is from Sue, who's a year 2 teacher. Your modules have taught me so much, and I definitely feel I can communicate with my student in a more defined and measured way. He's responding beautifully and is loving the security of the new ideas, his role within the class, and the respect he receives. Thank you, Sue, from the bottom of my heart. And she finishes off, thanks for teaching an old girl new tricks. I've been teaching for over 40 years. Anyway, I want to teach all of you some new tricks today, and that is all about how do we put in place strategy plus action to get independence and success. So for me, when I'm teaching a child a new thing, I have to think it's 50% me, 50% them. So I might think timers. I'm going to introduce timers. So 50% is what do I need to do? So I need to have the timer visible. I need to work out, does that child need a 5 or 10 minute warning? I need to work out how long they need to do the task. So set them up for success in the task. Make sure the task isn't too long. So what are all the thinking that I need to do? And then I need to think, okay, am I going to model it? And when you introduce timers, particularly parents, when you introduce timers at home, I highly recommend you model using a timer first on you. Like, okay, we've got 10 minutes till we need to get out the door. I need to find the car keys. I need to lock the door. I need to put the dog out to do a wee. What are the things I need to do? 10 minutes. Yeah, I can do that in 10 minutes. And I do a lot of commentary, like, can I do those 3 things? We're going to the shops. I want to get bananas, milk, and bread. Can I do that in 10 minutes? Let's see. And just sort of give the child a concept of time. But the key reason I get you to model it first is this. Oh dear, there's a long line at the supermarket. It doesn't matter. That was just a guide to get it done in that time. It's okay. What's my plan B? 5 more minutes. Okay, I plan to get out the door in 10 minutes. Whoops, I can't find the dog. That's okay. I can give myself a couple more minutes now. Just explain the flexibility, because some of my kids get anxious about time, and I find that's where people haven't modeled the plan B approach, which you've heard me talk about in other podcasts. Then we're going to practice using the timer, and I recommend you practice using the timer in lots of different ways. So at school, we might practice using it in different lessons. We might practice it for how long we've got to do a task, how long we've got to till we finish. So you can use it for how long and how long till we finish. You can do 25-minute task, 5 minutes warning till we finish. But with timers, I do find it's about persistence and consistency, which is the next strategy. So I highly recommend you think, okay, how do I notice that? How do I make sure everyone's using the 5-minute warning, not one person 10, 1 minute 5? I find everyone has to be consistent on that. And then I've got here a range of strategies. So you might use a few different types of timers. You might use my time timers, which I love, and I adore them. They're made for kids with autism. They're visual. They move back. The whole class loves them. I mean, in my experience, I use them with the whole class, but they are fantastic because they're visual. Most kids today don't wear a watch, don't know analog time, this is a beautiful red disc that moves back. Or you might use your phone, and there's lots of different timers and sounds you can have on your phone. Or you might use your oven clock. There's lots of different ways to use timers. Or you might use a watch. I mean, we have a timer watch, but some of my kids love the Fitbits. Find a watch, some way that they can use time, but also use a range of strategies. Now, this one's interesting in my action. Reward them using the strategies independently. This is so important, actually rewarding the child for using the strategies. So often we forget to say, well done, great. So one of my boys who didn't want to get off his computer game, what we did every time he got off, when the time was up, he got a token. And at the end of the week, if he had 5 tokens, he could trade that in for half an hour extra on his game. So remember, make sure the rewards are motivating. But so often we need to reward them for using the new strategies. What else? And visuals. So this is where I believe when I'm using time, I often will actually write down on my schedule how long we're doing something for. But the visuals themselves of the timers are actually visual. But I do recommend if you have a schedule, you always add time as well, because I've got kids who rush through everything or don't want to finish things because they didn't know how long. So they are all the actions I would take around using a timer. But remember, I'm aiming for independence. So what I want is the kid to set their own timer on their phone, to set their own oven timer. Is that a lifelong skill, learning when they're cooking to learn to use a timer? Absolutely. When they go to catch public transport when they're older, or if you've got older kids now and adults, do they need to be able to manage time to catch the train or the bus? Absolutely. And if they miss the bus or the train, do they need a plan B and to be able to look at the timetable and see when the next one's coming? Absolutely. So I'm aiming for independence, getting the child to put their own time timer on. So when they go on their computer game, I'm going to put my time timer on for 25 minutes, and that gives me a 5-minute warning to save or finish the game I'm on. Oh, okay. Or 20 and 10, whatever. But I'm aiming for independence. But the key is that it's actually up to the child to become independent, to start or finish at the agreed time once the timer has finished. And this is really important, that you need to remind them at first, but ultimately the kid needs to be independent. Now, guess what I've discovered over the years? The kids love it because people aren't nagging them. They get to be independent putting on their timer. In fact, I find the kids love the timer as long as you give them realistic timing. So, for example, if you have a kid who loves Fortnite, as my son does, I know the average game goes for 20 minutes. So when I'm cooking dinner and I'm aiming to have dinner, I give my son a 20-minute warning and I say, dinner's in 20 minutes. You're going to have to manage either that's your last game, or if you're in the middle of a game, or as they die, I hate that word, but they finish the game, then you're going to have to manage, you've got 20 minutes. So he understands that. Now, you have to think about what's realistic. So for a child to go to the toilet, get their school bag and get their shoes and socks on, does your child need 10 or 20 minutes? Teachers, when a child has to pack away their work, some of my children are a bit OCD and like to line everything up and put everything back in the right spot. Others just shove it in. Well, the kid who shoves it in is only going to take 1 minute. The kid who needs everything nice and perfect is going to need a bit longer. So to build that independence, remember that's about you setting them up for success with the right strategies at the beginning, working around the time. But I highly recommend when you first start using time that you reward them for doing it within the time. Well done. You did that in the 10 minutes that we planned to do. And particularly with their work tasks. Look at you. You got all that done in 10 minutes. And I would recommend they get it done in 5 minutes. So they actually sit there and watch the clock tick down. There's no harm in that. There's no harm in a child finishing early. In fact, most of my kids would prefer to finish early than not finish. So they prefer to sit there and watch the clock for a couple of minutes, or you can teach them, wow, you finished early. You can start the next thing. So like all of us, wow, I got a car park really fast. I can start the next thing. Wow, there was no one at the checkouts. I got out of the supermarket really fast. That means I'm going to be home earlier. Talk through these things. So strategy, timers, action. So let's go through the different actions. We can model it, practice it. We can take small steps. We need to be persistent and consistent. We need repetition. Remember, kids on the spectrum love repetition. We need to use a range of strategies. We need to reward them for using the strategies. Now, I've got social stories, but you could use a social story for timers, but I tend not to, and visuals. So they're the actions we're going to use. Now, I would love you to take something else like I have on the 50-50 plan, the strategy, action, independence and success PDF for you this week. So choose something else like the visual schedule. So when I first start using a visual schedule, I might have to point the child to the visual, get them to take the visual off and post it in a finish box as soon as we finish each task, or get them to move it from start to the finish. You might have different people use different schedules, but at first I'm directing the child. I have some children where I can only have the first 2 steps or the now, next, later. But by the end of their schooling, I'm hoping they can follow a whole day and timetable. And I'm beginning with the end in mind. In the future, will their job require them to follow a schedule? Absolutely. Does something like cooking require them to follow the steps? So this is a life skill, following a schedule. All of you, my guess is today, had a bit of a schedule in your head. What time you're leaving home, what time you're getting to work, what time you're dropping off the kids, what time you had to get to an appointment. Think of yourself. You all had a schedule for the day. So this is where schedules are fantastic, and teaching children to use them is really important. So again, the strategy is schedules or timetables. The action is I'm going to model it. So at first I might be modeling moving those visuals. As the child gets older, I hope they can just be independent and look at the schedule. Or lots of my kids know their schedule off by heart because we have repetition. We're going to practice. Of course, we need persistence and consistency, and this is where I feel home and school really need to make sure that we're both using those schedules. Now, at home, it can just be a calendar on your fridge that the child crosses off each day at the end of the day, because a calendar is a timetable or schedule too. And some of my kids like to say, we're finished Monday, bye-bye Monday, and cross out Monday. But then they can see ahead, there's a long weekend on Monday, or, I'm getting my hair cut on Thursday, or school camp's coming up. So I'll actually put on that calendar at home things that are coming up. When I worked in an autism class, the kids all had their monthly calendar on their desk, and this was nonverbal children, but they really did understand that routine of crossing off each day. And then anything that was new or different, we would add to the timetable. And some of my boys particularly like to put special activities they love doing on there, which days they were going to get it. And some of my children, it was just the cutout word or the visual, the board maker visual we would stick on there. And I'd always send that home as well. Now, it's so easy to take a photo and send it home to the parents and say, hey, look, we've added this to the calendar at school. Can you add it at home? I'll send home the visual, because that creates consistency. Again, I would reward the child for following the schedule. So some of my kids who get anxious moving from one activity to the next, I'll actually reward them to move, and I might even just give them a sensory tool as the reward. Social stories are great. We're saying sometimes we do things on the timetable, sometimes we don't. Sometimes teachers get sick and they're away. Using those words like sometimes and creating social stories that explain the schedules and why sometimes things change. Sometimes my kids really do need some social scripts to explain why the calendar changes. Like, we were going to go to the dentist Thursday afternoon, but now we can't go because whatever happened, and we're moving it to Wednesday. Always tell the child where something's been moved to. I get kids where it just says no phys ed, but it doesn't tell them what they're doing. We have no phys ed today. We're going to the hall for a special assembly. Always tell the child what it's replaced with. I've talked to you before about Your Words Matter. If you missed that podcast, I'd highly recommend you go back to it and print out the one page on Your Words Matter. And particularly the word no, or we're not doing something, or don't do something, it doesn't tell the child what to do or what is happening. So remember, on your schedule, you must replace it. And visuals are a really important part of your schedule. So can you see I've gone through those same actions: model, practice, persistence, small steps, consistency, repetition, range of strategies, reward, social stories, timers, and visuals. All would be used. You can choose whichever ones work for you, but consider a combination of those actions. And then I'm aiming for independence, that the child can follow the visual schedule, they understand the changes in the schedule, and can regulate their own anxiety when this occurs, and they can refer back to the visuals to increase their understanding. So if any of you have kids who ask repetitive questions around what they're doing, when they're doing it, I highly recommend that you need to reassess your visual schedule, that there's something on there that isn't making sense to them or making them worried or anxious, or things have been changed in the past and people haven't told them. So I really, really hope that I've got you thinking about beginning with the end in mind. There's a whole lot of examples in the PDF to download, like teaching signs of anxiety, using social stories, being aware of your own tone of voice as a strategy, and, organisation supports, creating consistent routines. So I highly recommend you have a look at all those strategies on the PDF and think about what actions you can take to aim for independence and success. Because remember, always begin with the end in mind. And just a reminder, if you want to dive in deeper to these strategies and really understand how to use them, I would recommend you have a look at doing my online course in June this year. It really will give you some deep understanding of the things I'm touching on today. So if there's anything I was saying today that you're like, I'm not really sure what she means there, well, I would encourage you to think about doing online learning. Now, if you don't know if online learning's for you, jump online ASAP until June 12th, 2023, and the free webinars are available, and you can try my early years one, Tony Atwood's, or my teaching strategy and behaviour support for all ages and stages. I highly recommend you have a watch of one of those or all of those. If you enjoy them and you think, yay, this is for me, then I recommend you enroll in the online learning. It's a fantastic way to learn strategies, ideas to make a difference to the kids you know. I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Atwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.